Well, good morning and welcome to the MAPS-3 Citizens Advisory Board meeting. It is the appointed hour and we'll call the meeting to order. Second item on the agenda is a consideration of the minutes of the previous meeting. We have furnished everyone a copy of the minutes in advance, and in response to that, Michael Adams had some suggested amendments that he would like to see incorporated. So we also have a copy of the amended minutes of the meeting, and I'm going to ask Michael if he would share with us those amendments that he'd like to see us adopt.
Well, sure. Just there was, I think, in the last full paragraph on page 3, there were some comments in there, and I think it stated that I didn't believe there was any benefit to moving the convention center project up by 9 months. And I think, in fact, my comments were more directed upon the impact on the urban renewal Court Shore project of moving the park back 4 years. And so I had suggested some rewording on that, striking the first sentence there and amending it was just saying, Mr. Adams noted that in comparing option 1 to option 2, the only significant difference was that option 1 moved the completion of the upper park back approximately 4 years and moved the convention center up 9 months. He asked if the delay in the completion of the upper park would have a negative impact on the Court Shore urban renewal project, and if there was still a desire to complete the upper park in conjunction with the boulevard opening in 2014. And so with no other comments, I would move that the minutes be approved as amended.
The motion's been made that the minutes be approved as pursuant to his amendment. Is there a second?
Chairman, I had one change I'd like to make on it. On the page discussing the recommended options and the vote, I believe that I did not vote affirmative on that, but I didn't vote negative either, so it was an abstain. Not that it makes a difference to the vote count, but I just wanted to make a note for that for the record.
Okay. Are there other amendments? Do you accept that amendment, Michael, to your motion?
Sure.
All right. The motion has been made that we accept the minutes as amended. Is there a second? Second. Susan has seconded that motion. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The minutes are adopted as amended. Item 3 on our agenda is to receive the MAPS-3 revenue and expenditure report. Eric, would you like to walk us through that?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. This is the report ending April 30th, 2011, and we've used the same format that we've seen in previous months. I think some of the highlights of the report will be including interest. You'll see that the revenue to date is just in excess of $88 million. You'll also find the summary of expenditures by project below, and with that I can answer any questions that you might have.
Michael, as our resident financial officer, any questions?
No, looks fine.
Okay. Anyone else? Any comments about the revenue and expenditure report? One question for me, Eric, would, based on what we see here, is it fair to say that the revenue is slightly above what was projected?
It is, and it remains to be each month. So as we take a monthly collection, this month I believe it was approximately 8% above our target, and so we're continuing to see good stride in the collections.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Then let's move to item 4. We have 2 reports there. One is for consideration of the MAPS-3 Convention Center site selection process. We have a site analysis report in front of you, and this is before us for action today. Eric, would you like to brief us on that?
I'd be happy to again. And obviously, we've been working on the site selection for the new convention center for some time. The process began earlier this spring when Populous was hired as our consultant. Their primary subconsultant is GSB, which is one of our local firms that's assisted throughout the process. We had a series of 4 workshops, a couple of additional meetings that took place, going through some very lengthy discussions about sites, going through an overall process. The subcommittee received this report earlier this week on Monday, and they have recommended that it move forward to the advisory board. And so we have a presentation for you this morning. GSB is here, Ryan Eshelman, representing the team that's put together this report. And so I think as we go through this, if you have any questions, you can ask those at the end, and staff's recommendation is that we recommend approval to the City Council. So with that, Ryan, thank you for being here.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to address the board. I'm here representing the Populous GSB team and want to walk you through the history of what we've done over the last several months, working with Chairman McDaniel, Ms. Hooper, and the other members of the Convention Center Subcommittee, and explain to you the process and tell you about the results of that process. This is kind of the timeline of our activities. We met on several occasions with the subcommittee, worked closely with Eric and his staff. Just Tuesday, actually, we made the final presentation to the Convention Center Subcommittee, and so we're pleased to be here before you today. We conducted several workshops with the subcommittee. Initially, a kickoff, kind of orient the subcommittee to the process. It was going to be a collaborative process, working closely with that subcommittee. We weren't working in isolation. The initial workshop, we just discussed a broad list of sites, discussed the criteria by which we were going to evaluate those sites, and we confirmed the program for the project, both for the convention center and for the adjacent convention center headquarters hotel that's proposed to be a part of that project. In the subsequent workshop number 2, we narrowed that site list down to 4 and started to discuss rankings. In workshop number 3, we eliminated 2 of those sites because of some technical and logistical issues related to those sites, cost issues, and we restored a 3rd site to that list, the next one down on the scoring chart, discussed those 3 sites, and when we returned for the 4th workshop, we presented a final recommended site, which I'll present to you today. When we started, we kind of took the list of sites that had been discussed publicly, it had been discussed by city staff. We took sites that had been proposed for sale by local landowners, and we also did our own due diligence and investigated other parcels that we thought might be suitable. And we started with this master list of 8 sites you see here on the map. As we studied those sites, we learned that the boundaries of those sites were a little bit hazy, and we could move, combine parcels, change boundaries as we needed to find the best configuration. So we added what we called 4 hybrids, which are just modifications of some of those 8 sites to include or exclude parcels, push the boundaries slightly, but they're generally in the same location. So you can see a hybrid site, for example, composed of the U-Haul site north of Interstate 40 and the lumberyard site south. So these hybrids were added to the mix. So we had a total of 12 items under consideration, sites under consideration. We narrowed those with the help of the subcommittee to 4 sites. You see those highlighted here: Quarter Shore North, the existing Cox Center, North Bricktown, and what we were calling the Bricktown East Hybrid. As we studied those, as you might imagine, we determined that the Cox Center was incredibly difficult structurally and financially to modify in order to introduce a new convention center without affecting the operations of the current convention center. So as we studied that, talked to the structural engineer, determined that that was not one of the top priorities for redeveloping that site as the new convention center. We also did a lot of work with Transit and Rick Kane and understood rail lines and followed closely the work of the downtown transit hub team, and determined there were a lot of issues affecting the North Bricktown site in terms of rail alignments and right-of-ways that compromised it, we felt, as an ideal site. So those 2 sites kind of fell down the list, and at that time we reintroduced, we reintroduced the next score. Oh, lost my presentation there.
There we go.
Pardon me. We introduced the Quarter Shore South site, which was the next site down on the scoring matrix, and studied it as one of the 3 final sites that we had agreed to narrow the finalists to 3 when we started the process. So, at the end of that entire process, narrowed it down to these 3. Our recommendation, in conjunction with the Convention Center Subcommittee, was that the Quarter Shore North site, which has been occupied by the Bob Howard Auto Dealerships most recently, was the preferred and recommended site. Now, as a part of that process, we developed a lengthy list of scoring criteria, which are weighted based on their relative importance. And again, there was extended discussion with the subcommittee about how these should be weighted, what were the most important criteria. So this was revised a number of times, but you can see this introduces an objective component to this evaluation process. There's a scoring system, and you can see how these scores align and rank these three sites. You can see the Court Shore North site being ranked the highest, followed by the East Bricktown site, and then the South Court Shore site. So this was the final scoring tabulation. Now that scoring was not the only component of our selection. There were also more subjective measures. Try and back up here. More subjective measures. This is an urban design analysis associated with that Court Shore North site. You can see the site there in blue. You can see the orange site adjacent to the west, which is our expansion parcel. You can also see highlighted in green, light green, the existing hotel stock. And so one of the benefits of this site is the number of hotel rooms which are within a quarter-mile walk of this site, which is an important criteria. The proximity to the Ford Center and the existing Cox Center were added benefits, taking advantage of those arena uses as a part of a convention program. You see the green circles, which are portals into Bricktown. Important to have access to that existing nightlife and restaurant environment in Bricktown. So this diagram helped us analyze the positive impacts of this site. And these were done for all the sites, but this reflects our recommended. Then we also developed very, very basic planning diagrams for the building on the site to confirm that the program fit and that everything worked. We developed for the recommended site several options of development. The primary option involves, you see the word below grade in the lower right-hand corner. The primary option involves dropping the exhibit hall below ground. The exhibit hall is the windowless portion of the convention center where trade shows and those kind of elements are held. So the loading in the exhibit hall would be dropped below grade. And the ballrooms and meeting rooms, which have the pre-function halls with lots of glass, would be up at street level. This allows us to have truly a 360-degree building, no back door visible. Because of this incredible site's proximity to the Myriad Gardens and the new boulevard and the arena, there really is no obvious back to the building. So this strategy gives us the advantage of treating all sides as the front. Above that are additional meeting rooms. You can see the future expansion parcel and the hotel parcel there on the site. And this diagram shows how that arrangement would work with the large windowless space below ground and the kind of glass box above ground. One thing that's important to note is that with this strategy, a lot of the building mass is buried, so it's going to be dramatically different than what we see at the existing Cox Center. This building would only be the convention portion would only be about 50 feet tall, so it would be substantially different and would have a lot of glass and windows and street activity. We also studied another option in which we kept that 360-degree exposure at the ground level, and then we placed the exhibit halls on top of that, and it allowed the Harvey Street spine to continue basically through the complex. You can see that diagram here elevating that exhibit hall. Makes the building taller, but it doesn't use the below-grade exhibit hall. We communicated with Flintco and others that have built extensively downtown to test the feasibility of all these strategies, and we feel confident in both the costs and the technical feasibility. And these are some basic diagrams that were developed to illustrate these ideas. This is option A. You can see option A, you can see the illustration of a 360-degree building, and you can see the hotel adjacent, and you see the gap that runs between, which continues the Harvey spine through from Myriad Gardens to the new Court Shore Park to the south. Forgive me, I'll scroll back to that. That graphic. There we go. So you can see that spine at grade passing through the block, and the hotel with great views overlooking the gardens and the park. It's another option in which the exhibit hall is elevated. You can see it expanding there to the west over over Hudson. You can see the spine passing between the hotel and the convention center. And then another option entirely we discussed was that at some point in the future, when the exhibit halls for the existing Cox Convention Center were no longer needed, we could occupy the southwest corner of that existing Cox site as a potential hotel site and leave some open space on the end of that convention center site to effectively connect the two parks, and also to connect us a little bit more with the Ford Center could potentially become a grand outdoor space. When we win the NBA championships, that's the place where everybody spills out into the street and has the street party. So some thoughts about how we might develop this site. And again, when the project goes into full design, these will be developed and refined, and an actual design solution will be proposed. Through the process, we created a list of pros and cons for all these sites. You can see these enumerated here. But again, proximity to the existing parking stock, restaurants, and hotels were important. This is an incredible civic address on the boulevard, on the park, across from Devon Tower, adjacent to the Ford Center. A great front door for a substantial building that will represent our city. And so we felt like the strengths, both intuitively and objectively in our scoring, the strengths were evident. And thankfully, we were thrilled that the Convention Center Subcommittee, when we brought this recommendation, voted unanimously in support of it. So we felt like there was a lot of consensus that this was a really strong site. So that is a quick tour through our process and the results of our analysis and selection, and I certainly invite any questions that you have about the work that's been done.
Are there questions? Harry, you have any comments you want to add?
I think the only other item that I might add is with your recommendation for approval today, this would be scheduled for the City Council meeting on July 5th. We would then have another presentation made to Council at that time with the full report, similar to what we've seen today, to make sure that Council fully understands the process that we've gone through since February. But with that, that would be our next step.
Ryan, I want to make sure I understand this. I think I do. The options that have been presented are still out there to be decided. The only thing we're deciding today is the recommendation for the location.
Correct.
I mean, that will be further studied, and there will be more recommendations made later. But the only thing we're looking for today is a recommendation on this particular site.
Correct.
And I think the Chairman makes a great example. I mean, obviously, as we've worked on project order discussions, there is yet a lot of work ahead of us on the Convention Center and the other projects. We will go through a separate consultant selection process to engage a designer, somebody that will actually put together the plans for the building on what that might look like with numerous options. And we typically look for 2 to 3 or more options when we start doing new structures like this one. So that's something that will come in a year or more from now.
Rusty?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for that presentation. And first, I know I've said it before, but I do want to repeat that the subcommittee that was put together to work with you guys, again, it takes care of a lot of my concerns, but I'm very pleased with the way the subcommittee came up with the final recommendation. I really want to have a question related to one issue, and it's going to be, and it's either for you or you guys that are on that subcommittee, between the two parks. So I think as I look at all this, all the pros, the cons, it's a good location for all these long reasons on the pros. One con I don't see listed, it's kind of alluded to, requires subgrade or upper level exhibit hall. I guess that's in part because Marriott on one side, Marriott Gardens on one side, the park on the other. I guess I want to make sure when you guys studied it, when subcommittees studied it, I know you thought about that. That's why we have this below grade idea. Is that not such a critical issue that is it still the best spot given that? And did you guys, when you decided the spot to recommend, come up with the best spot for the convention center or the best spot for Oklahoma City and especially downtown? I think I know the answer. I'd just like to hear from either side, the subcommittee or you, what went into the decision so we can be assured that it's the best spot, even though it's in between Marriott Gardens and the park. That's been discussed for a while, and we asked about that earlier on in this advisory board about what's going to be there. Should they be separate? Should they be together, one continuous all the way from downtown? I hadn't thought about it at that time. I knew there was space there. It hadn't crossed my mind. So much space, we're actually going to put the convention center there. Great if that's the best spot, but is it the best spot for the convention center, or is it overall best spot for all of Oklahoma City?
Well, I don't think either Sue or I would want to speak for everybody on the committee, because it certainly was well vetted. There were many viewpoints about it, and we had lots of input from lots of people. My point of view is that the committee was trying to find the best place for the convention center. We didn't spend much time doing it, but I would direct your attention to this list of criteria. We spent a lot of time with the consultants going through what criteria should we take into account in determining this, and at least from our point of view, that was more than just a scoring process. It was something we all had a chance to have input about. And in fact, the criteria changed 2 or 3 times as people from the committee thought one factor would be more important, and the factors that you've taken into account, I think, have wondered about, were taken into account. And so, as Ryan has already said, when we looked at the scoring, was there any site that was absolutely perfect? Well, who knows? But of all the sites that were available, this one was clearly the winner from the criteria that we developed, including the things that you've asked about. So I think at the end of the day, our committee felt really great that we had considered those things, and that we found the best site, all factors considered, for the convention center site. Sue, anything you want to add to that?
First of all, definitely I agree. You the committee. There was loads of discussion. I'm kind of thinking, Rusty, maybe there's a couple different questions here that you were asking about, and one, which is very understandable, is part of the below grade, above grade type thing. I think the reason that we had that brought into the conversation was just maybe it's kind of a planting of a seed type thing, but we wanted our consultants that were working with us, I think, wanted us to have a vision that wasn't just a typical building, or that you're going to put your exhibit hall on the main floor. And the reason for that was because of the existing Myriad Garden and the new park. And so obviously that was one factor we wanted to be sure to have conversation about, and to reap the benefits of experiencing that. And so I think that's why we had some of those discussions, because along that line then came we got to check into that and make sure water tables and, going below grade, going above grade, and structure-wise, and would it throw it out cost-wise to do something like that. But actually, our consultants, again, helped us understand that a lot of places have, like Phoenix as an example, have a below-grade exhibit hall, and they don't have a view. So all of those things came into play. And I would say, just personally, that is it good for Oklahoma City? Yes, that site. But that was one piece of, you see the list, 20-some criteria. So,
Ryan, did you want to expand on that?
Well, you all have covered a lot of the important topics. I think one of the things that we were careful is that this building had to be a good fit for the site. We had to maintain connectivity between the gardens and the future park. We also saw this as potentially kind of the gateway to Coeur d'Alene. Coeur d'Alene is a long view into the future, but this is kind of the doorstep to Coeur d'Alene. And we felt like, we know how long the Galleria parking garage sat waiting for something important to come fill that spot. Many, 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 many years. This is an incredibly important piece of land that what goes there would have an impact on our city for years to come. And we felt like, based on our studies, that this would be a great fulfillment of that block. When phase one is completed, that entire block is developed. There's no holes in it, and it kind of launches forward into Coeur d'Alene. We felt like there were some merits to East Bricktown in terms of people being able to walk to restaurants, but we felt like It would be unfortunate if people came to town and didn't see all the great things that were happening downtown, so we felt like being able to walk out the front door, see the gardens, see the arena, see Devon Tower, and still enjoy all of that Bricktown at their front door, that was kind of the best advertisement for the city, to show people the very best of what we're doing in the heart of downtown, and not only supporting our convention business, but invigorating, the urban core and what's going on downtown. So I hope we've addressed some of those concerns, but we were thinking at 30,000 feet, we're thinking about, is this the right site for the convention center? Is this the right site for Oklahoma City? Weighing all of those options.
Sure.
Well, thank you. And then I'm satisfied, having heard from the three of you, exactly what you said, and it's the best for Oklahoma City, and I'll agree with that. The one thing I guess I want to drill down on a little bit, relying on the hours that you guys all spend on it, it's the cost, to make sure today that I hear enough that, because as I'm comfortable that's the best spot for Oklahoma City, it relies on either below grade mainly as well, like, or somehow having the connectivity I see. So I've heard references to the cost works. You mentioned, you talked with Flintco, cost and feasibility, it works. I won't have us go through the hours and hours that you guys have, but whatever any of you might want to say about, are we sure, not sure, are we as sure as we can be today, we are going to be able to do it with the cost, the funds that we have available. I just don't want to get out to where we didn't hear it here, and in the future, all of a sudden we can't do underground, and now it's above ground. I'd really like to see it underground if this is the best for Oklahoma City. Or some other, you've been very creative. So what about the cost? Are we sure? The water table you mentioned. I think I heard Councilman Shadid ask about a water table. That's all I've heard of it.
Mr. LaForest, maybe I should respond. One of the things that staff, was also concerned about was the cost, and so I think that's why you see two significant options on this side, is that there is actually an above-grade option as well. If we find ourselves in a situation where the challenges are going below grade or cost prohibitive, there are some scenarios that can be studied that's going to allow the building to be built above grade, maybe at a lesser cost. But until we get the consultant on board, the designer, it's going to be hard to tell what those trade-offs are. I think the best example that we had was, if we build the facility on grade, we will ultimately be drilling hundreds of piers down to bedrock. I mean, that's traditional construction for Oklahoma City. But the case that they made was that if you take full advantage, and knowing that our rock is down some 45 to approximately 50 feet, if you excavate down to that depth, there is the possibility to actually build the foundation right on top of the rock and not have any piers. So there's some cost trades that might be realized by not building piers and actually building a basement, but not doing a very thorough analysis. I mean, obviously they need to go through some detailed plans and design to get there. We have multiple options on this site, and that was something that at least made staff feel better about this as an overall recommendation as being very feasible.
And I'll also direct you to page 50 of your comprehensive analysis document. There is a cost analysis of these three final sites that weighs both what we call building cost premiums, that is the additional cost of building the building if we did something like drop the exhibit hall, and site cost premium, which were the existing costs of developing the site itself. And these are cost per square foot premiums associated with these various sites. What we found was that in terms of the overall cost of the building, the differences were fairly small, and we quantified those fairly specifically, so we have a good feel for, if we do go for the subgrade solution, we generally know what that costs, and it works well within the budget parameters that we're working with, understanding that we may choose an alternate design option at that point. But we feel like we've done due diligence in terms of the cost and the technical issues, and that we've picked a site that we know we can build on affordably.
I know that several of you attended some of those meetings. If any of you want to add your comments, Nat, you have something?
I just had a question about the cost analysis. Can you say a little bit more about the difference between the Quarter Shore South substation versus without substation? I know the moving cost is there, but it's pretty dramatic. So can you
Absolutely.
Embellish?
When we were doing the process, we were working with roughly a $250 million construction budget, understanding that $30 million that's been discussed widely was being associated with the substation relocation. So the Court Shore South you see in white excludes the impact of that substation. During our discussions with the subcommittee, some of the members said, well, I think we need to examine it with the impact of that substation to see, because we're going to have to move it to do that construction, so let's see the impact of that. That gray column you see added reflects the Court Shore South site with the cost impact of that substation. So you can see the south site is fairly favorable in terms of its development costs without the substation, but it becomes the highest cost premium when you roll that additional expense in there. So that, at the behest of the subcommittee members, we included that in our analysis so that we could see both scenarios.
So it's a $30 million. Is that the number that was kind of used for the cost of moving the?
Right.
I was surprised that it's a 13 some odd fold increase. So it struck me. So
It's $30 million is in excess of 10% of the budget for the project, so it has a meaningful impact on the cost estimate. And Eric may want to add more to that, but that was the...
I don't think there's anything additional other than, we simply just have not had council's decision yet on how to address that budget. That's something that we're planning to have come a little bit later in our process, but at least for the analysis of the sites, both options were considered so that whether it is or it is not.
I will add that in both scenarios, the rankings were unchanged, so the inclusion or exclusion of that cost as a part of the consideration didn't have any bearing on how we ranked the sites, but we want to make clear that we considered this cost and reflected it here.
Kim?
I just want to make a couple of comments here. Michael and I attended the subcommittee meeting on Tuesday, and I wanted very much to hear the subcommittee's final comments as they made their vote before it came here. And there was no discussion. There was nothing to further vet, to talk about. It was a unanimous recommendation and a lot of commentary about how well everyone felt about that. I know Roy Williams made a phenomenal comment about talking about the entire process and the convention center and how the convention center is an extension of our home. And I hope at some point everyone gets to hear what Roy said because they were beautiful words. I also look at this and say, okay, from a design point, if you had a collection of treasures that you wanted to showcase in your home, you wouldn't spread them all throughout your house. You'd nestle them together because together they make the strongest impact. And that's exactly what putting this convention center does for this part of Oklahoma City. It fills those voids. To me, it works as a wonderful way to break up Myriad Gardens and our park so that people know they are two distinctive things. There's a beautiful visual way to see back and forth. We've allowed conventioneers, again, to participate in our whole downtown. We have a plan for expansion. To me, there's so much solid logic rooted in this, and then we get to enjoy all the amenities as well. So I know this committee has done an amazing job in what I consider a relatively short amount of time in looking at all the parameters and criteria, and I really think that this spot hits the nail on the head. Good job.
Thank you for those comments.
Other comments? All right, well, this is an action item for us today. If there are no further comments, we are asking for your recommendation to approve this or not. Is there a motion?
I'd like to move approval of the analysis, the site analysis report.
It's been moved to approve it. Is there a second?
I'll second.
The motion's been made and seconded. Is there further discussion? If there's no further discussion, then all in favor say aye. Aye. Is there opposed? Say no. The recommendation is adopted, and we'll move forward to the council for their action. I think Eric said on July the 5th. Thank you for your interest and your attention to this. Ryan, thank you for your presentation. We appreciate that. Item B under reports is relating to the River Racecourse lighting improvements. And Eric, you want to brief us on that?
I'd be happy to. We are obviously moving very quickly ahead on two of the early start projects for the Oklahoma River, and one of those is the River Racecourse lighting project. As you recall, we engaged Garver engineers to work on this, to develop a plan, and as a part of that planning process, They have now completed a preliminary report, which is about a 30% document when we look at the overall scheme of things. What's included in your packet is a draft report. They have since completed that report, and so today what we're asking for is for you to allow us to move forward with that completed report, taking it on to City Council. There were very few changes between the draft and the final. It was mostly just a final review going through the subcommittee. The subcommittee did consider this on the 14th and recommended its approval as well. We do have Curtis Brown with us today from Garver, and he has a presentation to give to you and can answer, again, any questions that you might have. Thanks, Curtis.
Curtis.
Pleasure to be here. Again, a quick overview of the race course lighting project. We are lighting the river basically from Byers Bridge all the way to in between the I-35 bridges, which is the 1,000-meter mark. We are going to be establishing both practice level, which is base level lighting, and event level lighting for the higher profile televised events is what the desire of this project was. The layout from our early design was 21 light pole locations. They're staggered on both sides of the river, and this layout will accommodate both lighting levels. No additional poles are needed. If you go to the higher lighting level, you just add some luminaires on the top of these poles, and I'll discuss why that is here in a moment. And there are 10 major points of service that OG&E will be coming to. Each one of these major points of service will serve 2 or 3 poles as it goes through, and those will be controlled by a wireless controller where the central hub is located back in the finish line tower, where each pole or series of poles can be controlled through that network. That's kind of a general overview of where we started and concept of this. The lighting controls, some of the desires on that were to really have some flexibility, not only for the base level lighting, but for the event level lighting, future architectural or special lighting, and also PA, television systems, and some others. So the main controller will be expandable, have different modules to be put in it, controlled through a touchscreen interface, and also have a link through other wireless controls where somebody does not have to always run up and do the finish line tower to control the lights, but through an iPhone app, even be able to control the lights down there on the race course and turn things on and off. Typical light pole that we're looking at is the example right here. They're about 110 foot tall with luminaires very similar to this located on top of them, and again 21 all the way down the shore. The interesting part of the conceptual design is really trying to discover what we needed to light the river at. There are not industry standards for rowing, kayaking, or other nighttime events. This is the only one in North America, and so these standards aren't set. So we kind of looked at other venues around and kind of set a base level lighting for our first pass at 30-foot candles and a televised event lighting of about 75. This was determined because like most NCAA sports and arenas have lighting levels in excess of about 100-foot candles, and for practice levels they go back, but NASCAR, for an example, has lighting levels around 30, 35-foot candles, so it's a pretty wide range. It really depends on the size of the target object. Again, like a baseball arena, a very small object moving very quickly across a very short distance, you need to have a very high lighting level in order to be able to pick that up on cameras and visually. While NASCAR, very large objects traveling on a 2-mile track, relatively slow relative to the speed, can have a little lower lighting intensity to have very good visibility. So we kind of try to weigh these in on the sculling and kayaking events and where that came from. After we set these events, we did a mock-up study, and we set that up, not only have people out there looking at it, but set up a professional television camera, rigged to a recording device and a TV monitor, so you could actually stand out there and see what this would look like under televised events. And through this mock-up, we discovered that we're a little too conservative in our lighting levels, and really ended up being able to bring it down to about 20-foot candles for a practice level, and 40-foot candles was more than adequate for televised events. An example of this is right here. This is a shot of a 40-foot candle lighting example. Again, we only had one standard set up instead of the whole river, so you do get a hot spot. So if you just kind of hold your attention to the middle of it. But as you can see, the rowing team there is very visible. You can zoom in and really read logos on the skulls, and you have a good illumination of the water. Compared to a 20-foot candle, you still get a pretty good illumination of the water. It's a little bit darker. The rowers can still see each other. The boats illuminate, and the crew members illuminate very well. So it's very suited for the practice level, a safe environment to be able to see. The TV cameras did have great visibility at this, but they were at their maximum aperture setting, and so if there were other lighting elements that came in, it'd be very difficult for them to adjust. So that 40 would be important for those televised events. Another example, actually, we had a camera mounted on one of the skulls. You can see the water around the skull at the 40-foot candle lighting level. And then again, at the 20-foot candle lighting level, you see the water's a little bit darker, a little bit more shadows. But again, as a rower, you have great visibility of where you need to go, even at that practice level. Project coordination, some of the interesting elements on this were with ODOT. We're putting big telephone poles in the middle of the right-of-way with a lot of lights on them and in between the bridges, so of course a great concern in being able to do that. ODOT was there at the lighting mock-up. We actually did the mock-up right next to the I-35 bridges to have a good example of what was going to be happening. They were very pleased with the way that we were doing it and the way it turned out, had no objections to it, and we actually have a formal letter accepting our design approach and location of poles and aiming and all that coming very shortly. OG&E, major coordinator on this. We were concerned, given the amount of light that we're needing to pull, that they may actually have needed to build a new substation. They've done their analysis. No new power substations need to be built. They are going to run new primary service, and they're able to serve our 10 locations. We're coordinating easements with them right now, but they're able to serve this facility without any major impacts and be able to proceed forward. So that's going very well. Preliminary cost estimate for this base bid, and again, the base bid is just for the practice level lighting, 20-foot candles. We're looking at just about $2.5 million total, and that's well within our project budget of $3 million for this element. But also, through the discovery of all of this, there are some recommended design alternatives that the River Committee and the master planners came up with that we evaluated. We had 9 in total, and we actually are recommending 4 of these to be seriously looked at and incorporated in as bid alternates into the design documents. And the reason for this is mainly because these alternates, like one of the options is actually a greater setback of these lighting poles, that they need to be done now because they're not something that can be retrofitted later. And others are to also achieve the greatest visual impact and cost savings in erection. We'll walk through those. Sorry. The first one is a high-profile event lighting. That's a design alternate, go from the 20-foot candles to the 40-foot candles level. Realignment to the North Shore poles. The first 2 poles, or the 2 poles closest to the finish line, are actually set back at about 95 feet away from the shoreline, mainly to be set back from the line of sight of the judges' station within the finish line tower so they have a clear, unobstructed view of the river. With the master planning and the other, there's a concern that having 2 poles set back and the other poles set forward, it's kind of impacting the linear look that they are looking for in the boathouse district. Coordination with the future boathouses that, because Devon gets us a lighting standard setback, that OCU a year or 2 from now has one sitting on their front door to maybe set all of these back and create the same visual impact all the way down the river. So that was the cost of setting those back. Triangular fixture array. Instead of having the traditional square or rectangle fixture array, they're wanting to continue this very angular look of the boathouse district and blend in. So it's actually arranging the lights in a triangular fashion versus a rectangular fashion. And the last recommended option is a 25-year warranty, which I'll talk about here in a moment. The high profile, 20 to 40, what this actually does is actually the base level is 2 rows of 7 lights for 14 fixtures total. It just adds another 2 rows on for a total of 28 fixtures. These circuits would be interchangeable where if they're doing practice level, the bottom rows could burn, Then the next day, the top rows can burn and cycle back and forth, so it gives you a greater cycling time and burn life on your bulbs, and be able to cycle those or both of those on. This event, this alternate adds about $870,000 to the project, which brings the base bid plus the event level to about $3.4 million. Realignment to the North Shore poles. Again, I talked very briefly about the first two poles being set back at a greater distance. When we set back the other poles, we need to actually set them back to about another 50 feet. It raises the pole height from an average of 110 to 130 foot, so we have the same striking angle against the water, and actually increases the number of luminaires as well, so we can get the same intensity. As we're further back, we need to have the same intensity. So that's the cost of this realignment, and it'll keep all the poles on the North Shore all the way to the I-35 bridges at the same setback. This alternate is about just shy of $600,000, $558,000. If you take just this alternate and base bid, you're looking at just about $3.1 million, or if you take both alternates, it's about $3.9 million. Triangular fixture array. Again, maintaining the triangular theme of the master plan. It really helps illustrate the destination aspect of this venue. This is one of the most visible venues. As you're driving down I-35, these poles are right there on the bridges. Having that architectural feature right next to the bridges just really draws your eye to it and leads your eye down the river to the Boathouse District, and just defines that as a corridor. Really makes that a focal point to the site. This change in configuration actually increases the fixture count, going from 28. If we do 28 fixtures, we don't get a full triangle, and so we have to add some additional fixtures in order to complete the rows and make that look. And this triangular array will also have a space frame, a structural steel space frame around it that will serve to mount the future architectural lights on it. They're going to do linear LED strip lights around these space frames, so in the future the stadium lights can be off, the architectural lights could be turned on, and it'll really create a very dynamic impact and visual cue for this. So we're providing the infrastructure for those. This is an example of what those triangular arrays would look like. As you can see, it's much more aesthetically pleasing than the utilitarian square ones. And the cost on doing this with the extra rows and the space frame is about $740,000. A base bid plus this is about $3.2 million, and total with all alternates recommended so far is $4.7 million. Final alternate we're recommending to be incorporated in is a 25-year warranty. And these warranties, many of the manufacturers that offer these extended warranties, and they will offset the actual cost if you do an on-call service by usually more than 50%. They're a great value. What we're going to require is a 40,000-hour performance period with a minimum of 7 group relamps. What that means, they'll come and exchange all the light bulbs every 7 years. By doing this warranty period, they're able to cycle and cluster that so you don't get 5 light bulbs burnt out and you come and replace 5, and all of a sudden those 5 are burning about 20% hotter than the rest of them. And you start getting some differences in uniformity. But by having this maintenance program and cycling of the light fixtures under this program, you keep a good uniformity of burn throughout all your fixtures, and it saves those calls. Preliminary cost estimate, we're estimating around $287,000 for this warranty, and for bringing everything to date, all alternates, about $5 million. Schedule drivers. Coordination efforts with the other Boathouse District projects and the inclusion of the alternates has had a big impact on our schedule. We're in front of many of the other projects and trying to get those master planned and brought together. Another schedule driver is the significant lead time on these. We're looking at about 2.5 months from the time that a contract is signed and the equipment is ordered to having the equipment delivered on site. And so it's very hard to expedite a project if you don't have anything for almost 3 months. Coordination with ODOT and the legal agreements is another critical path item. We have most of the coordination done, but just the process of getting the service agreements and maintenance agreements signed and through legal on both groups with the City of Oklahoma City and ODOT just takes some time. There's about a 6-month period in there for those. With those schedule drivers in there, this is our tentative project schedule, looking like in bidding here in September, starting construction in November, doing infrastructure starting in December, the site work and laying in all the utilities, and then the poles are fabricated and delivered in February and installed, and the full system is up and operational in late May and June. One of the things we're looking at in the schedule is working some phasing and trying to get the first 500 meters lit and operational, and then working on the second 500 meters. That way, some of the nighttime sprint events or other things that could happen in March and April, possibly. That was an awful lot, so open it up for some questions and any discussion.
I think the one thing that I'd offer is, as this being one of our first plum reports to kind of see process and see how things are developed, is maybe the discussion on ad alternates. And we're going to frequently see this type of approach from our consultants, and they're always tentative to the budget, and the budget on this project is $3 million. And so what you're seeing is a series of options that are being considered so that when bids are received, and if we receive some favorable bids, that we have some opportunity to add some items to the contract at that time. And so today, there are estimates. You're going to also see that in some of the reporting that there's some contingencies that are also included in those estimates until those final plans are complete. So we would expect, in all probability, that maybe one of the alternates could be selected. We don't have to decide that today, and that's something that we can decide at bid time. But we are going to go through this process on numerous projects where you're going to see a lot of variety, and then once we get ready to award a contract, we will have to make a decision at that time to move forward.
Eric, in thinking about a $3 million budget for the lighting project and a $60 million budget on the river, is it possible to decide to spend $5 million on this and $2 million less on something else that's included in the 60? Or what is the flexibility that's involved here?
I think we can collectively go through and look at those kinds of opportunities and make recommendations to council. Obviously, as we're continuing to work through the implementation plan for MAPS 3, there is a list of projects that are desired, and so we'll need to just go through a process of making a determination which project maybe shares some of its budget with another project, and I think we can approach that as needed. But wouldn't suggest that we need to make that decision today.
Dee, any comments from your committee?
Well, we love the aesthetics, and we think with the river it's really, really important to have it looking the best it can possibly be. And I think everyone on the committee, budget allowing, is in favor of making it look really good, making sure that it can be televised. That's really important, making sure that we can compete with other venues for Olympic opportunities and big races. So I think we were all... we didn't make a decision on it, but I think we were all very favorable that if that could be worked into our budget, and we'd like it to look aesthetically as wonderful as it could be.
Yeah, and I think to kind of clarify my understanding of Eric's comments, that we're not recommending we do all these alternatives now, we're just recommending they be studied, and we put them out for bid, and the determinations as to what may or may not be able to work within the bid will be available, as well as once we have some numbers, the opportunities maybe look for other sources of funding that the Boathouse District may be able to go to other parties and see if there's some other ways to do some of these alternatives outside of the MAPS funding. I think that gives the flexibility there for that. I know when I first looked, I said, well, gee, how can we come in and recommend $5.5 million? But we're not really recommending $5.5 million. We're just recommending that we look at these alternatives and see what may be available there. And so, I appreciate Eric's comments, I guess, on how the process works, and I guess this is what we'll see later on. And I would remind that, I think I made the comments earlier, that the Boathouse projects, I think, were $120 million, and MAPS was set aside to do $60 million of the projects. And so we do have in our subcommittee choices to make as we go through here as to which projects MAPS will be able to fund and which projects they'll need to go out and try to find other sources for.
And so you have a report in front of you today, and your recommendation of this report to council, and council's approval will then authorize our engineer to move forward with those plans. And then there would be an additional presentation that would be made towards the end of the summer, back to you as an advisory board and the subcommittee as well, to consider any new information, Obviously, they'll have some details that they're not able to share with us today. You would expect to see some of those contingencies to kind of shrink as more things are known. And so that's just in about 3 short months that Garva will be ready to come back to us and make that presentation.
So then, we're asking you to vote on whether or not to receive this recommendation to move it forward to the council so that the next steps can be taken. Any further questions? Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Been moved to approve. Is there a second? Second. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The recommendation is adopted. Thank you. And thank you, Curtis, for your presentation. Appreciate it. Item 5 on our agenda, we have some contracts to consider. Eric, you're going to outline those for us?
I'd be happy to. We do. Our first one today is the recommendation of the renewal of the MAPS 3 program consultant services contract with Architectural Design Group. As you recall, this past December, we entered into the original agreement with ADG, and it was set to have a renewal to occur on the city's fiscal year beginning July 1. And so coming up very shortly is a renewal to have them proceed with services for the next year. We're not recommending at this time that there be any fee adjustments. There is still a fee from the original contract approval in December that's available, but we wish to continue their services starting July 1. We are anticipating an amendment to that contract once we know a little bit more about the implementation plan. As we know what projects are to be worked on in the coming year, they're going to have some additional services that they'll provide to us that include plan reviews and design reviews and cost reviews. They'll also have some services that will assist us in the field as a part of construction observations. Those aren't currently included in the contract, but would need to be added in the coming months once we have some direction on the plan. And so today is just a renewal, but soon we would also have an amendment to come back before you. So with that, I can answer any questions that you might have.
Does this come with a recommendation from staff that we vote to renew it?
Yes, it does.
So this is the renewal on the same terms and conditions that we approved previously?
Same terms, and extends it for an additional year through June 30 of 2012.
And same cost?
At the current cost for the current services. But again, we'll have to up those services because there's some things that we never negotiated that will need to be performed in the next year.
Understood.
Any questions? All right, shall we recommend the renewal of that contract? Is there a motion? Is there a second? Motion's been made and seconded that we recommend renewal of the consulting services contract with ADG. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It is adopted. Is it significant that we have warned Mike Mize to an absolute frazzle so that he wasn't able to show up today for this after 37 presentations in 3 days? I guess not.
No, Mike had a planned vacation that he's taking, and so, but obviously in his absence, we do have Tom Wilson with us today, and I know that they continue to support us throughout the program. But Mike will be back with us in about a week.
I kind of thought maybe he was going to speak against it, so they changed it to a chair.
It's probably a well-deserved vacation on Mike's part.
I think we could all agree that Mike has a well-deserved vacation if you would convey that to him for us. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Nicole. All right, item B.
We do have a second renewal for consideration. This is the renewal of the MAPS 3 implementation and coordination agreement for the Quarter Shore area with the Oklahoma City Urban Renewal Authority. And very similar to the Architectural Design Group contract, we anticipated that there would be annual renewals of this agreement. And so this was an agreement that we entered into last October, primarily for the acquisition of the park properties, which are continuing to be performed. It's not 100% complete, so the renewal is necessary. It also does not come with an increase or a change in the fee, so the original fee is still sufficient to allow us to proceed. But this would allow those services to continue through June 30 of 2012. So staff is recommending its approval, and we're requesting that you have this forwarded to City Council.
Are there questions regarding renewing the agreement with the Urban Renewal Authority? Shall we approve it? Is there a motion? Is there a second? Been moved and seconded that we approve the renewal of the contract with the Oklahoma City Urban Renewal Authority. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It's approved. Item C, Eric.
This is our final contract item for your consideration today, and this is the recommendation for approving the contract for architectural services with Elliott and Associates for the MAPS 3 Oklahoma River Racecourse windscreen, a fee of $180,732. This was the second of the early start projects that we conceived several months ago on the Oklahoma River. We've taken some additional time to negotiate this agreement because, again, it's a one-of-a-kind project. There isn't anything for us to base this on. There's not another venue that has windscreens that serve its race course, much like the lighting. And so several questions were raised. Through the negotiation process, the architect and staff have agreed that we should begin actually with a study, and a study to help further understand the project and its requirements. And so this isn't for the full design services, although we are anticipating that once the study is complete and the presentations are made, that we have confidence in the project, that we would amend the contract and move forward with formal design. So before you today is a contract to do study. We'll call it Task 1A, Study and Conceptual Design Services. And with this, we can move forward on better understanding the windscreens for the Oklahoma River.
Dee or Michael, you all have recommendations from your committee?
Well, I'll just, I guess, comment that we had a presentation at the committee, we had discussion at the meeting about the contract and the issues with the windscreen, and as Eric said, this is very unique. It hasn't been done before. We're addressing the Oklahoma wind, and we all know what that can be. And so it's going to be, I think, interesting to see what alternatives are offered and how this issue can be approached. And so we would move to recommend approval.
Been moved. Is there a second? Been moved and seconded that we approve this contract for architectural services with Elliott and Associates. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is approved. All right. We now have an opportunity to authorize the expenditure of some money, Eric.
Well, and let me clarify. We would like to have staff's recommendation to strike the item from today's agenda. We have a alternative approach with Public Works Department. Let me explain the item a little bit further. The original action item was to begin some early environmental on parcel V29, which is one of the Skydance Bridge parcels. It's a property that recently was acquired by the City of Oklahoma City. We actually don't have acquisition fully yet, but we're working towards that in the next month. But to expedite the Skydance Bridge project, there's a building on this site that needs to be removed. It requires some asbestos study and some other studies before it can be demolished. And so, knowing that the Skydance Bridge schedule is very aggressive, we wanted to make sure that we put into place the proper measures to get things moving. And so this item was created in the last week to allow us to do that. Since we published the agenda, the Public Works Department has identified some of the resources that they're going to be able to do that with the Skydance project. So this item is no longer required of the MAPS 3 process, and so we will continue to keep you updated, but we do not need to take action on this item today. So we can strike this from the agenda.
Good news for us, doesn't it?
It is.
Well, we always accept good news. All right. Item 7. Are there any other items, Eric, for discussion or action regarding the MAPS 3 program that you want to bring to our attention today?
I think there's just two items that I might bring up to speed. The project order that we previously took action on last month has been taken to council as an informational item. City Council has asked several questions, and there's some additional thought that is going into this, but we're anticipating in the first week of July 5th, that council will be prepared to take action. And so we were scheduled for that, and so we should be able to update further after their next meeting, which is in about 2 weeks. But we're continuing to press forward on the implementation plan, and obviously once some direction is provided, Eddie G will have the remaining pieces that they need to formally finish the plan that we hope to bring back to the advisory board as soon as possible. This will be the plan that not only includes the project order, but it also has the project budgets, it has the scopes of work, it generally describes the overall MAPS 3 program. Only other item that I would mention is as an informational item, we have also included a park acquisition map update for your information. We have not had any change since last month, so there is nothing new to report. But again, as we've described in the past, the boxes that are in blue, dark blue, are those that have been acquired. Those that are in the light blue colors of the upper park are ones that we're proceeding with acquisition, and the ones in tan are ones that offers have yet to still be made and underway. So obviously fairly significant progress in the park, and it's moving forward very quickly. But I don't have anything further. Thank you.
All right. Any questions for Eric about that?
No, I would like to make a comment. I think Eric mentioned that the council was presented with the preliminary action plans last week, and I had the opportunity to view that presentation and the comments by council, and I wanted to say thanks to Tom and to Kimberly. They made some very nice comments there, and I think very well described our actions and our process and our thoughts, and represents it well, and I appreciate that. So, thank you.
Well, thank you. It is true that we, Eric and our consultants, Mike Mize with ADG, and Kimberly and I were at the last council meeting, and if you want to see that, I guess it's available on video, but there was a spirited discussion, and I think a good one, and so they'll be taking up formal action, but I think we've got the issue squarely before them, and I think they're going to act on it July the 5th. I want to offer each of these subcommittees an opportunity to, if you have any items that need to be considered by us, or just informational items. Rusty, let's start with you. You want to, anything from the State Fairgrounds Committee that you'd like for us to know about?
I know very briefly, we did meet since our last meeting here, and there was really only one topic of note, and it was the timeline, and I'll be very brief, and it was that, especially hearing from Tim O'Toole, who's a member of our subcommittee, he's also the president and CEO of State Fair Park, Inc., he was happy with both options 1 and 2. The whole subcommittee discussed it. As far as the 2 timelines that ADG recommended, there was really not much debate or controversy. Either location was fine, and in particular, there was even a comment that moving it up any further could even be a little difficult for logistics of making improvements. It's ready, there's a plan, but it's far enough up that it's exactly where the subcommittee likes it. And options 1 and 2 are the same. Pushing it back later, depending on how the city council goes from here, would be objectionable. But otherwise, very pleased with where it is in options 1 and 2. And that was it from our subcommittee. Thanks.
Sue, Trails and Sidewalks Committee?
Trails and Sidewalks is working, and again, we're kind of waiting on the timeline also, because we don't have some specific plan from the city on sidewalks, so we're trying to develop that, and we need a timeline that lets us know we're going to need a consultant, and in order to hire a consultant to help us with that, getting the timeline approved from City Council will help with that. But I would like to ask each of the advisory people, because we are all located in different parts of the city, would you start kind of keeping an eye out and thinking about where are there areas of use or tread that you see in the grass that just might be kind of that might be an area in my neighborhood, my ward, that could use sidewalks. Because we've identified hundreds of miles, and so we're going to have to pare that down quite a bit, and our city office people have helped us identify some target areas. We're going to set up some criteria. Zane's going to help us with the process on that, and we're looking forward to our next meeting. And this committee is rolling. We're ready to go, and we're happy because we're at the front of all the timelines. So we want to get something going so people in Oklahoma City can see something on the ground. And it's going to be trails and sidewalks.
Great. Michael Dover, Senior Wellness Centers, anything to report?
Thank you, Tom. We had a pretty comprehensive report from our consultants at our last subcommittee meeting. We've been so busy getting reports from our consultants that I think that some of the subcommittee members are looking for more of an opportunity and time to kind of process all of those reports and kind of begin discussing some of the implications and some of the suggestions as we move forward. So as we speak, we are trying to find a date that we can have another subcommittee meeting, I think the week of July the 11th. So I'm excited about that. I would like to comment on the subcommittees that I'm involved with, there were members on both of those subcommittees who did voice some concerns about the process having to do with the timeline. And I hope that, in this case, what I tried to say is that the convention subcommittee had their meeting, and of course their recommendation came to us, and we all dealt with that at our last advisory board meeting. But that, again, there were members on two of the subcommittees, the parks and the wellness centers, that just, I think, felt a process issue, that it probably would have been a good idea that all of the subcommittees would have had an opportunity to kind of vet from where they sit the implications for these timeline kind of revisions. So I hope that moving forward we can really kind of consider when decisions are made or recommendations by a subcommittee that has the kind of profound impact on all of the others, that we allow time for those subcommittees to kind of vet these kind of issues. I think that is a process issue.
And I think in a little bit of a response to that we did have the opportunity to have ADG Mike Mize go back through the subcommittees this last month with the recommendations of the advisory board, and then we did hear those comments. But I think I also heard too that after seeing the recommendation, even parks and wellness, I mean, I did hear support for that recommendation that was made. But comments well received that there were some process questions. But after they did see that, and knowing that council has not taken action, I think they were pretty comfortable with that. But
I wouldn't disagree with that,
okay.
but I think towards the process, I don't think could be kind of we need to consider that as important as it is process.
And those comments were well received from staff.
Thank you. And then the final thought, Eric, I was thinking, and I've had this thought before, and I know at some point we talked about this, and that is, I think that we might be at that stage where I would like to kind of go on a field trip, for lack of a better term, and kind of begin visiting those projects and kind of getting a feel that about what's going on. And I would ask if you think that that's in order or appropriate, how some of the other subcommittee members feel that would be helpful. It would be helpful for someone like my age. It kind of helps to go on site and really
And we definitely have some site visits and some things anticipated. I think it's just a matter of timing, and so we do have some ideas about that. And some of the other subcommittees have requested site visits, like the Park Subcommittee would like to go to the Mary Gardens, and we're just trying to make sure that more of the completed works are available for us to walk through those. But absolutely, we think that those are entirely possible and needed as a part of our overall plan.
Thank you, Michael. Those comments are well noted. Nathaniel, have you guys had a meeting with the Modern Streetcar Committee?
Is that an understatement?
That is an understatement.
We met last week and discussed got an update on the implementation plan, and we had the same concerns that Michael discussed as far as the procedure or the process, and how important that is. But overall, very accepting and excited about the implementation plan, and the only questions that were asked was, does the timing and the phasing of transit affect our chances for federal funding? And the answer, and I'm comfortable with it, is no. Our chances for federal funding, if anything, are enhanced by having a very deliberate kind of phasing of transit. And also just making sure that we had questions about how does cash flow work if part of your project is at the tail end, does that affect, if you run out of money, what happens? And there's a good track record of MAPS handling those issues and being very good stewards of managing cash flow. So I felt like we, for the most part, went away comfortable with the implementation plan and having our questions answered. We got an update, among others, on the hub study, and so the recommendation was for the Santa Fe current station to become the intermodal transit hub. And so at some point that'll become an action item for us, but last week it was informational and to understand the process, how they arrived at that recommendation. So that'll be forthcoming. And then as far as we're concerned, certainly having the implementation plan approved will enable us to kind of bring in a consultant under our banner to continue the environmental and engineering analyses that have been spurred by the Alternatives Analysis Committee. But the good news is we have a lot of agreement with AA in terms of routing, and certainly we acknowledge that there may be some tweaks that need to be done to the route now that we know where the convention center is going, and as we see the parks and the boulevard being developed. But it's hard to make those tweaks until you have kind of feasibility studies, so that'll certainly be part of our process this year. And then the last comment was, I think we kind of recognize that the next important step internally for us is to look at modes of power, and that's really going to affect the footprint of the streetcar and the engineering analyses and environmental analyses going forward.
Great. Zane, you want to add anything to that?
I'd just like to add that the selection, or the proposed selection of the convention center and now with the Santa Fe Transit Hub, going to help us kind of figure out what the bottom half of our proposed route will look like. So that's going to help considerably.
Thank you. Kimberly, you want to talk about the park?
Certainly. Well, our last meeting was certainly a spirited one as well, in reviewing the options on the timeline. Some surprised that the timeline had changed, and some surprised that the timeline might not have changed. So in the long run, we all agreed that obviously when it's all said and done, we will have a phenomenal park. I think our group is really ready for field trips, especially to the Myriad Gardens, just to get our heads wrapped around what is developing there. Now seeing the potential footprint of the convention center and things around it, I consider the park kind of like the carpet to everything, so now we're going to be able to start looking at what kind of carpet we want and to put things down. It's extremely, extremely challenging to try to get everyone on the same page at looking at something that's so abstract as a park. But I think we have a phenomenal group with a lot of ideas. We're starting to hear things from private enterprise for development either on the park or near the park. So obviously as these projects begin to percolate and things come together, I think there's going to be a lot of adventure and possibilities coming forth, and we're all very excited about taking it forward.
Thank you. Dee or Michael, you have anything else to add about the river?
I'd just like to say, definitely go on a field trip to the Myriad Gardens. We went on one to the river, and that opened my eyes to everything that was going on. It really made a lot of difference. So I encourage that. Mike?
Yeah, as far as our meeting goes over there, we also received a presentation from ADG, and we discussed that, and there were a few comments made, but I think generally everyone accepted the phasing of the river projects, and the primary focus that we had was that the Whitewater Center try to be developed and available for the summer of 2015 so that it could be used for training and pre-Olympic activities for the 2016 Olympics. And so that the phase of the project order that ADG presented, had that in there. And so I think that was the main concern of the River Subcommittee, and so they did that. We also received the report today that you saw from Garber on the lighting project and had good discussions on that, and you saw the outcome of that today, as well as had the discussions on the Elliott windscreen study. And so I think we've covered both of those points today and brought forth both of those recommendations. So I don't think there was anything else that we covered, but I think that was generally it.
I don't have anything else to add about the convention center. Sue, is there anything that you'd like to add to the report we've already made? Gary, anything you want us to know from the council? Any message or anything? Any comment from you?
No. I think the council's pretty good at sending their message.
That's my experience.
Without using me. I thought for a while we were going to have to issue a flak jacket to Tom there, but he seemed to do well. I would just say that having the advantage of going to all the subcommittee meetings and sitting in and listening to the discussions going on, I would really encourage this group and the subcommittees to think about all of the discussion and all of the emotions so far have been on this schedule and how it's moved around and the perceptions about what has taken place either politically or financially or whatever it may be to move it around. If you would just take your own committee or subcommittee and think in terms of when would we be ready? When would we have all the information we need? When would we have all the preliminary steps done? When would we get to the point that we're ready to go out for a construction contract? I think you'd be amazed to find out how close it is to the timelines that have been discussed, and maybe the timelines are a little aggressive in some places. Because I think that when you think of the more information you seem to gather on the wellness centers, the more information it seems you need on the wellness centers, and the transit with the federal dollars, and then you look at the alternative analysis study going on, and you look at the hub study, and you think about all those things that it takes to process these individual things, and I believe you'd find that all of the emotions about the schedule itself probably would be lessened, certainly, if not go away, because I think it's an aggressive timeline, and I think just today I was sitting here thinking about when you were going through the lighting deal, and you talk about, well, this is kind of new, and we need more study, and we got alternates coming up. It's taken longer to get the windscreen study going on, and that's projects that we said get after it. And I think you'll find as you go through all of these projects, you'll find that that's the case. So, I'm extremely encouraged by the people that have the ownership in those subcommittees and what they want to see for Oklahoma City, and I think we're going to have a great set of projects come out, and hopefully we can get past the emotions of who goes first, because I think they're all going to get done, and they're going to get done well. So just hang with us, and we'll try to get the Tuesday morning discussions over with so you can move on.
Well, that's great. I guess, Eric, we've already covered the informational item that was item 9, and are there any other comments from members of the board? As someone who went to 6 subcommittee meetings and a city council meeting last week, I wanted to thank all of you for the way those subcommittees are moving, and I wanted to publicly say how much I appreciate the time and effort that goes into those subcommittees. They're well attended, and there are a lot of people volunteering their time to move our city forward in MAPS 3, and I think they're being very well managed by Eric and his staff, trying to get that many subcommittee meetings, that many people together, that many projects moving in a relatively short period of time. It seems to me like things are going really well, and Eric, I commend you and your staff for doing that, and all the subcommittee members that are working so hard to move this process forward. Well, do you have any other comments, Eric?
Nothing further.
We now have an opportunity for, I'm sorry,
I'm
Michael.
sorry, I did have a comment, a question, and I guess first of all, I would, if the board members have not been able to, or did not able to attend the council meeting, or have not been able to view it, it might be useful. There's a good link on the city website to click to it. I think you had a link directed strictly to that presentation comments. You didn't have to go through the whole council agenda to try to find it, but as I said earlier, I think Tom and Kimberly both did a great job, but more importantly, there was a lot of feedback from the council and from other people there that it would be useful, I think, to all of us to kind of understand what the thought process is and how things are being perceived and accepted. So I think that would be good. I did have a question, I guess, for you, Eric. I think in the original resolution for the board and the subcommittees, there was another subcommittee for architectural review or something, which I don't think has been appointed. And I know a few weeks ago we were presented with a design option for a tunnel at the park, and today we've talked a little bit about design options for the lighting and things like that. I didn't know if that committee is still planned and what the role of it is, and if these are the types of things that maybe should be going through that committee and getting some approvals to.
I think it's a good question. So there is actually another committee that's yet to be formed, that is the Architectural Review Committee. My understanding, the way that it was conceived, was that it was going to be more for the buildings of the program. So wellness centers, convention center, anything that was more of a building type structure as opposed to maybe more of a, and we want to call the lighting not important, but more as a utility type project. Realizing too that several of these projects are going to fall into some design review committees that are already existing outside of MAPS 3 as well. So there is a river corridor committee that meets and discusses river items and things, and there's several things that are going to have to go before them as a part of projects, and so realize that that's not going to go unnoticed by groups that are in those independent areas. But we haven't received further, instruction from council yet on how to proceed on that, but I think it's building-based.
Okay. So these types of things would not be things we'd expect to go through?
I don't believe the projects we've started to date would fall into that category. No.
Okay. Thank you.
Further comments? Well, we want to open it up now to comments by citizens who are here. Is there anyone that would like to be heard today? If not, thank you all for attending. We're adjourned.